Hey, Motorman here, and today we're going to talk about the most common motorcycle crash that involves just the rider. It's called failure to negotiate a curve. Let's go.
Okay, if you've watched any of my 1,200 or so videos I've got on YouTube, or even better, my Ride Like a Pro video, or Surviving the Mean Streets video, you know that I stress 3 techniques. And I always say the most important of the 3 techniques is the proper use of your head and eyes. Wherever you turn your head and eyes, that's where the motorcycle will go. At low speeds, we want to master the friction zone and also the proper use of the rear brake. But the most important technique is the proper use of your head and eyes, because you're going to use this at all speeds, and especially you better be able to use it at high speeds. Now, the most common motorcycle crash that involves just the rider is called failure to negotiate a curve. Rider gets into the turn, may think he's going too fast, straightens up the bike and runs right off the curve. And that happens because the rider doesn't know where to look, how to use his head and eyes. For instance, here I turn my head and eyes and I try to look through the curve. I position myself in a spot that will give me the best view around the curve. Once again, I look around through the curve. So being this is the most common motorcycle crash that involves just the rider, does it have anything to do with age? Well, I'm going to show you a video where we had a rider that was 75 years old, had virtually no skills at all, and another rider who was probably 45 years old, and again had no skills at all. And we'll show you what happens to them when they try to make just a couple of turns at speed. And when I say speed, at about 10 or 12 miles an hour. And this also will depict why low speed handling is so important, because you practice in a parking lot, not because you're going to be riding out in a parking lot all the time, but we practice for the road. I guarantee you, if you're going to get into a crash or drop your motorcycle, it's much better to do so at 10 miles an hour than it is at 50 miles an hour.
To show you that age is not a factor, this rider is 75 years old, and what he doesn't have is technique. He cannot turn his head and eyes. If this was the street, he would have run off the curve right there. Again, he would have run off the curve. Think of these as S-shaped turns or switchbacks. If you don't know how to use your head and eyes, chances are you are going to run off the road. Here it doesn't matter because there's no cliff, there's no place to crash into except for the cones, and as you see, that's not a problem. Now, this rider is 45 years old, but again, he has no technique, cannot turn his head and eyes. Right there, he would have run off the road if this was out on the street. He's heading for the gate between the 2 cones. Let's see if he makes it. He does. Now all he's got to do is go through the next set of cones. He looks straight, and the motorcycle goes straight right off the road, or the imaginary road in this case, thankfully. Inside cone to inside cone here is about 36 feet apart. That's more than enough room to make this turn if you use your head and eyes. He makes it through this gate, doesn't turn his head and eyes, so he doesn't get anywhere near that next gate to his right, and he just gives up. This is what the exercise should look like, and with this group of bikes you can clearly see the S-shaped turns or S-curves. Everyone here is using their head and eyes and looking only where they want the motorcycle to go. These riders would never run off a curve out on the street. They know the proper technique and they know how to use it.
That's why we practice at low speeds. Even in motor officer training, when I went through my motor officer instructor class, first we had to master the low speeds. They would not take you up into high speed part of the course if you flunked the low speed, because that meant you didn't know how to use your head and eyes properly, along with the friction zone and a little pressure on the rear brake. So learn this technique. It will save your life. If you've watched it, I'm going to show you a clip on the Dragon that actually this crash occurred right in front of my wife as she was riding the Dragon with some friends. Typical failure to negotiate a curve. The rider thought he was going too fast. Actually wasn't going too fast, but looked at the wrong place and went right off the curve. And it doesn't matter if you're 18 years old or 80 years old. If you don't know that technique, if you haven't put that in your mind that that's how it works, you very likely could crash coming around a curve. I turn my head and eyes. I look through this curve. If I didn't do that and I looked straight, I guarantee you I'd either ride off the road or get really close to riding off the road. And if there's an oncoming vehicle and you look at that vehicle instead of where you want to go, chances are you're going to run right into that vehicle. This is especially helpful when you have S-shaped turns or decreasing radius turns. If you don't know where to look and when to look there, you are in deep trouble.